Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see some familiar names, and then we've got some folks that are joining us today for the first time. My name is Gray Mangum, and I am the Curriculum and Instructional Management Coordinator for Panther Creek High School in Wake County.
Hi, I'm Carol York, and I am Business, Finance, and Marketing teacher at Cary High School, also in Wake County.
And we are here today to talk about Project Management 2 and give you a little bit of an overview at that curriculum and some small changes that have occurred in the past few months with our curriculum. So this is kind of what we are going to accomplish today. We want to make sure that you have an understanding of the framework of project management and a little bit more information about our Project Management 2 curriculum. So we are here today. We're excited to talk to you about these things. If you have questions, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. You are welcome also to unmute yourself and speak with us. We'd love to hear from you and see you if you'd like to turn on your camera. So we would like to start with these three sentences here. And our numbers didn't show up, but the first sentence, I am new to teaching project management and have all the questions. The second one is, I have taught project management before, but need a refresher on some ideas and some best practices. And then number three is, I'm comfortable with the course. I'm just here for a couple of updates. So if you would please put the numbers 1, 2, or 3 in the chat, just so that we kind of know where you are in relation to Project Management 2, specifically Project Management 2. So the first sentence, number 1, I am new to teaching this. The second sentence, I've taught it before, but want to kind of get some information. And then the third one is, I'm just here for some updates.
Looks like we got a lot of new ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Most are new. We have 2 that would look like that were not.
Well, and Tammy, we know Tammy's not teaching it this year, but she's here with us in solidarity. We're glad to have you. Welcome back. Love to have you. Okay, we've got a district CIMC. Great. I am new to the CIMC role, but I'm loving that position. And I think it's knowing a little bit more about this curriculum is really good to be able to kind of jumpstart getting that into your district. All right, so it looks like we got a bunch of new faces with us for Project Management 2. So we'll jump right in with a little bit of information kind of about project management in general, which several of you know some of that information, but we'll get a little bit more into the curriculum. So we're going to talk about the Project Management Institute, process groups, and knowledge areas. That's kind of giving us an overview of what is project management. And then we're going to get into the curriculum, specifically the course blueprint, and then what the decomposition of an indicator is for specifically project management 2. And then as we end, we'll talk about just some of our best practices and some suggestions and lessons that we've learned along the way.
So this particular graphic is just one that I think is a great way to just think about group projects. You know, everybody kind of has their opinion on what project-based learning is all about and working in groups and the frustrations and the positives that go along with working in a group. And of course, you know, what better way to do that than with, you know, superheroes, right? And, you know, everybody has a role in their team. You know, there's always that one person who wants to do all the work. And there's always, you know, that one person who never wants to participate until it's time to do the presentation. And then they're up there like they did everything all by themselves. And, you know, that there's the people who just disappear and you never see or hear anything from them. But then when it's time to turn it in, they're right there again. But, you know, this is just a good way to think, you know, kind of get your kids thinking about who they believe they are in a team and try to assist them with finding ways to be part of a group project in different ways. So it's just kind of a funny, getting started way of thinking about group projects. So, of course, if you've been in the Project Management 1, or if you participated in any of our project management course related sessions, you know that our curriculum is very closely based on the Project Management Institute's body of knowledge, which is kind of the industry standard for the project management discipline. So we have, just like with Project Management 1, we have based this curriculum very closely to the guidelines of the PMBOK. And probably more importantly, at this stage, the state has adopted the Project Management Ready certification, which is sponsored by PMI as the proof of learning for Project Management 2. So this course will, going forward, be a certification-based course in the form of the PMR certification.
So to give you kind of an overview of the project management process groups, there are 5 kind of stages that we go through as we go through our project. Initiating is our first phase, and that's where we define what the project is, and we get the authorization to start the project. Then we go to the planning phase, so where we're establishing what is the scope of the project, what are the objectives that we want to meet, and what is the course of action that we have to go through in order to meet those objectives and get the ultimate stakeholder satisfaction out of the project. So then, after we've taken a lot of time to plan, and after we've gotten the appropriate authorizations, then we go into the execution phase. And that's where we actually do the work of the project, right? We complete the work that's been defined in the previous stages. The next stage is monitoring and controlling. And that is where we track all of the progress, and then we document all of the things that are happening throughout the project. So we identify anything that needs to be changed, any things that are going wrong in our project. We work to fix those, and again, documenting lessons learned along the way. And then finally, we get to closing, and those are the activities that finalize the project and get the final stakeholder approval for the project. So these are the 5. These are the 5 process groups. However, we often see them in order, but that's not quite the best way to view this. So Carol's going to talk about a better way to view these process groups.
So, we like to make sure that, as the instructor, that you get a feel for this, but also it's important for your students to grasp that project management is not linear. It's not an order of operations like math. It's a process that is all interwoven and ebbs and flows in different components. So I really like this graphic of project management process groups because I think it's a better visual of what's really going on when we are working through a project from start to finish. The initiating phase in this red group up here, it starts at the very beginning and it ends, in the planning phase as we are starting the execution phase, but it's not, a block of time. We also see that the planning phase and the monitoring and controlling phase also start at the very beginning of the project. They're not, concurrently happening after something else has already been done. And so I just think this is a nice visual that kind of helps you see the interrelationship between those process groups. And then when you talk about our true topics of conversation, or our topics that we are covering in both Project Management 1 and Project Management 2, we can then fit, each of these different pieces and how they fit into those process groups. So the knowledge areas occur throughout all of those process areas as well, some more heavily in one area than another. So it's seeing all those interrelationships that is, half the battle when you're talking about understanding and getting a working knowledge of the project management discipline. And so when we're getting into project management 2, we have in the prerequisite of project management 1, we have covered integration, which kind of shows us an overview of that interrelationship between the concepts. And then we have done a focus on scope, time, schedule, and cost. And so now we're going into those concepts that are what we consider facilitating functions: quality management, resource management, communication, risk, procurement, stakeholders, and then, although not a knowledge area, agile methodology is a method of project management that is heavily influencing the project management discipline now, and it is heavily embedded in the PMR, which is, again, the proof of learning for this course. So agile is something that has to be addressed, I think, throughout the course if you want your students to be successful in the certification exam.
And as Carol said, agile can be kind of put anywhere and should be everywhere within the course. So we want to talk too about some kind of general project assumptions, and this kind of goes back to the image that we showed of just kind of how these process groups work together. So project management is not linear. There's not a one step, then the next step, then the next step, then the next step. And so that's often difficult for our students to comprehend. And as we look at the curriculum, it's difficult for us to, as teachers, be able to say, okay, well, how do I teach all these things at one time? And so it's important for us to realize that it's not linear, and it really does build from one indicator to the next indicator. And we're going to utilize all of the things that we learned in project management 1. We're going to utilize those all through project management 2. And we're going to keep adding to our toolkit, if you will, of more and more things that we can do to define and make our project more successful. So that's an important thing for us to note as we go through this, that you need to be thinking about as you have your indicators. They're going to kind of be interwoven no matter which way we can put them on a standard blueprint.
Okay, so we kind of did a KWL for this course to kind of let you kind of see, what we know, what we want to understand, and what we expect to learn as we are teaching this course and helping our students to grasp this information. So what we know about this is that there are 7 objectives in Project Management 2 and 30 sub-objectives. Now, I'm going to pause for a second and let you digest that, because when Gray and I were working on the curriculum, it took us a little bit of time to digest what that meant. It's a lot of material. It really is. It's a lot of material.
So that's seven standards and 30 indicators. Those are the specific words that DPI uses, but we always call them objectives and sub-objectives. So that's why it's on here like that. But think about 7 major units and then 30 indicators within those standards. Lots to cover.
Lots.
Right. Deep breath, right? So, we highlighted topics to kind of, we want to highlight some topics to kind of help you get started, give you some teaching tips to kind of help you get going. And Beth may have to help me with this because I don't know that we updated it. We're not in pilot anymore, are we, Beth? Are we out of pilot?
Yes. No, we are not.
We are not in pilot, or we are in pilot?
No, we are not.
We are not in pilot. Okay, excellent. And then the exam for this coming year will be the certification exam. Okay, so, and I'm assuming that if your students don't pass certification, then the alternative will be teacher made. That's the way it is in Wake County. I'm assuming that is the way it is. So if your students are unable to achieve certification, then they will do some type of teacher made final exam in lieu of completing the certification. So we've tried to, strengthen this curriculum to make it a little more out of the box. we're, hoping that we've, gotten the details in, in time for summer conference. I believe like we've done a good job of getting this released. And we're here to support you in the rollout of this material into your schools across the state. One of the things that we want you to get out of this, though, that we want you to learn is the curriculum guide is really just a framework. Your school and your classroom, better than anybody that's coming out of the box with this. And so if, the Uncle Clive's Memorial Park project just does not fit for your students and it doesn't click, then you can implement a project that does something similar for your class. If you have a hands-on project that allows your students to, work through these concepts and not use the things that are canned here, do that. This is not meant to be, the end all be all. This is the only way you can teach this curriculum. It's meant to be a guide to get you started and allow you to supplement and complete the concepts of this course in the best way possible for you and your students. So you will need to adapt and supplement as you see fit for your groups.
And I think that's particularly important, and not to belabor the point, but if you are in, like, just knowing we have a CIMC here, right? So thinking about what is your specific school's focus. So if you have a certain type of a career academy at your school, or you have the teacher that's teaching project management is really involved in a CTSO, right? Any of those types of projects can be substituted for the projects that we have provided. So my students did a project for the One of Us Foundation because one of our sports teams was doing a fundraiser. So I substituted a project in my class so that they could get real world experience within the scope of a real school project. So there's lots of ways to integrate real world situations from your school into project management. This goes really well with construction, really well with hospitality management. I think it goes.
Foods. I mean, if you've got a culinary type program, those things are great for project management.
Yeah, any of your TED courses, anything like that is going to teach a customer focus, right? Any of those types of things really would lend themselves very well to this course. This would be a great course to integrate into a specific, like, if you have a specific set of courses that your students take for a career academy kind of thing, and you can substitute one of these courses in, this is going to help any student that's going into really any field. This is also great for health sciences, research-based things too. Interior design, yes. Thanks, Tanya. That's true too. So any of those, apparel, the second level of apparel, it would go really well with. So any of those types of courses, this class is a super strong pair with any of those types of courses.
And I think what Gray has reiterated is something that I know I say a lot, and when I do training sessions, and I know he does too, that project management really fits in anywhere. No matter what your aspirations are, or your students' aspirations are, project management is something that they can use no matter where they go. And so it's a great fit anywhere.
So as Carol mentioned, there are seven standards. So these are the ones that we're going to focus on. The first one deals with communication management, but it also lumps in the nature of project management and ethics. This is really good because we were talking yesterday. This is really good because this is the first indicator, 1.01, is a review of all things project management 1. So this is a super, super strong review of that entire curriculum. So that's good for those students that may have taken this and they were not at school, or during hybrid learning. This is a great way to do that. Then we go into quality, resource, then risk, procurement, and stakeholder engagement. Again, they have had some introduction. Students who have taken Project Management 1 had a little bit of an introduction into stakeholders. So that's something that you can continue to pull from Project Management 1 as you go through the course, right? So that's something to think about. Once you get to procurement, you're going to talk a lot about resource management within procurement. So thinking about how can we take the previous topics and spiral back and go back to those, that's a really important thing as you go through your course.
And Gray, one thing I want to point out here, now I've taught this now one time, and I will tell you, because this is not linear, okay, because this is not linear, and you don't have to, you may find, because I'm starting to see that you may not want to teach this necessarily in this particular order. So if you think that something is more effective because you're doing a group project for your school, and you think, okay, maybe I need to do procurement sooner because my kids need to get those materials, these don't necessarily have to go in sequence, because even though they build on project management as a whole, they don't necessarily build on each other. So if you think stakeholder engagement needs to go at the beginning, then teach stakeholder engagement first. I'm kind of leaning towards personally moving Agile to the forefront, because I think it's something that needs to be taught across the whole curriculum now with the certification. So I'm just saying this blueprint is not something you have to necessarily teach in sequence in order for it to make sense. It may make sense for you to do it in a different order. I just want to toss that out.
So now we want to talk about how we can take an indicator and how we've kind of broken these down. So the only one that this does not specifically apply to is 1.01, because again, remember, that's a review of Project Management 1. So just know that that one is a little bit different. So the first thing that each indicator is going to have is to define the following terms, and you're going to have a list of vocabulary that is needed for that particular indicator. One thing that's true about project management that makes it a little more of a challenging course is that there is a lot of vocabulary that is associated with this class. So that's something that you're really going to have to work on for you personally to understand all the vocabulary, but then how do you translate that to your students? So that's an area of focus. We have different ways in which you can do that, and that's been integrated into the curriculum. But think of the ways that is best for your students for vocabulary review, whether that's a Quizlet or a vocab notebook or something like that. That's a really important thing for you to do. So then we kind of summarize what that indicator is about, and then we discuss the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs, and then we analyze the importance of that indicator. So you will notice that inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs are present in just about every single indicator, and those are terms that are defined by the Project Management Institute. We have within the slide decks that are created for each unit, we have we have specific images, and those will be really helpful for you as you go through.
So for each one of the indicators, again, we've put together a document, and I believe we actually talk about that in the next slide. We've put together a document that helps define inputs. If you've been teaching Project Management 1 and or Project Management 2, you've probably seen that a lot of the inputs, the things that you start with in a particular knowledge area, repeats over and over and over again. You see things like environmental enterprise factors and organizational process assets and expert judgment. And so there are things that repeat. Even though they're not the same thing, they're the same concept that you put. I mean, expert judgment might be different from stakeholder management to risk management, but it's still expert judgment, okay? Or, enterprise environmental factors, the things that influence us both internally and externally in our organization, they're going to be the same. The influence may be different, but the actual concept itself is the same from one knowledge area to the next. And so to try to simplify this, and also allow the students to get a way to see how they're all integrated, we put together a inputs document. So, and you can present this in whatever way you wish, whether it's, having the students go in and actually complete this document themselves, which is kind of what our thoughts were initially. Have them go in and say, okay, for plan procurement management, what inputs do we have? And you can see in this example, in the project management plan, what parts of the project management plan do we need when we're planning procurement management? And we need the scope management plan, and we need the quality management plan, and we need the resource management plan, and we need our scope baseline. So those are the pieces that we need out of that input, which will help us to develop our procurement management plan. And so this kind of, when you get to the end of the semester, this kind of gives you this huge document that puts everything together, and you say, oh, okay, well, look, and basically every one of these tabs, I have to pull something out of the project management plan. Okay, so that, and does that make sense? And why would that be the case? So it's something that is a visual that you can use to kind of help them start to understand the inputs as a whole and how they fit together within the knowledge areas. Okay.
So just looking at if you look at the top, it says the execution steps are in the first row. Generally speaking, you're going to have, so for example, procurement is standard 5. So plan procurement management maybe 5.01. Conduct procurements would be 5.02. Control procurements would be 5.03. So those are that's kind of helping you think through those pieces, and then all of the inputs are listed. And generally speaking, you're going to use almost all the different inputs in the different in each one of these phases.
So Lou, I see your question. You could potentially use the input stock as kind of a rubric to help them, developing projects, but I think your projects are really going to be more the outputs for each unit than I think the inputs are. The inputs are more your tools. I don't want to use the word tools. Your inputs are more your ingredients that you're gathering together in order to complete the outputs. So I'm not sure how beneficial it would be as a rubric, but I do like the way you're thinking through it. I mean, that actually is it is definitely something that you could have them pull up and say, okay, looking at this list, have you gathered all of the ingredients that you need in order to use your tools and techniques to process this to get the outcome that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you have a project, right, and you are, one of the things that you're asking them to turn into you to evaluate is a project management plan. Okay, you need to turn in a project management plan. Well, you need to plan procurement management. In your project management plan, you should have the following things. I think it's great for a checklist of here's what you need to turn in. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not a rubric, but at least a project outline, maybe, if you will, of here's what I need to turn in to ensure that I have successfully done the project management plan in reference to procurement management. So yeah, that will help with the organization of your projects for sure.
Definitely a checklist.
Yeah, so here are some of the projects that we're going to do. The first one is a high school communications project. The second one is a quality assembly line. Then we have Uncle Clyde's Memorial Park, wedding risk management, the birdhouse procurement, and then field day and Easter egg production. So those are the different projects that we have within the indicators or within the standards. Again, if you need to switch one of these out for another one, you are welcome to do so. So the high school communications project, they're going to work on a communication method for an entire school. And then again, things like assembly line, they're gonna create a product, right? Do an assembly line, and then they're going to make sure that each of those things looks the same. So they're gonna measure the quality of their outputs. So again, each of these projects have different kind of things that are tailored more towards the specific standard that we're going for. But again, they can be used for just about any one of the different standards.
Yes. So the Memorial Park is designed around resource management and having your students think through all of the resources they might need to create this Memorial Park based on the budget that's given and all of the requirements that Uncle Clive has requested in his Memorial Park that he's donated funds and property for. In the wedding project, you're looking at risk management. What kind of things could go wrong that might derail the project, or what type of opportunities might be available, because the opportunities are, of course, positive risk. So you're looking at, risks and opportunities for making this wedding successful. You're looking at, some make or buy related concepts in procurement. What resources did you need to build this birdhouse? Where are you going to acquire them from? Looking through, deciding, which resource you want to use. Should I purchase it from X, Y, or Z, and why? So your basis of estimates, those types of things.
And that project is a great one to do. Like, that's a great project. If you have time, you can actually do the project, right? You can execute that project. You can collect the materials, or you can procure the materials, and then take that project through execution. If you don't, that's fine. You're still going to go through at least the planning phase of the procurement. But again, that gives you as the teacher an opportunity to do whatever you see fit based on the timeline of your class.
Mm-hmm. And then, Gray, you want to touch on field day?
So that's about stakeholder engagement, and so that's talking about how do you with the field day project, you're going to interview various levels of stakeholders and find out what they want out of a field day, like an end of the year field day, or like the senior picnic for your school, something like that, and then try to create a plan that satisfies the needs of all of the stakeholders.
And then the Easter egg production, that's the Agile project. The project was designed as an Easter egg production, but you could do anything you want to. It's working on an iterative project. So, you start with, here's what you are trying to accomplish. You let them try it for a while, and then you pause, regroup, adjust your planning, and then try again until you get it where you want to. So you kind of give them a chance to try traditional project management, and then a chance to work through the iterative process and which one is more successful. And you could do this with any type of paper design. I mean, it could be Easter eggs, it could be, footballs for the football team, it could be basketballs for the basketball team, it could be, rainbows, it could be anything any kind of design related things that's simple and can be, simple assembly line and adjust and regroup type of concept. So it's mainly designed to see the difference between, okay, if I plan it and work through the whole thing, what's my quality outcome, versus if I, stop and make adjustments along the way, how does that impact my outcome?
So I did a similar project with my students. We assembled bookmarks. We did a Henry Ford assembly line kind of thing, where they had to paste a picture of the Model T, a little quote by Henry Ford. They had to put a hole punch in it and then tie a string to it. And then we measured quality. And so we definitely should have done the Agile process, because their plan did not go well. And so it was a hot mess. So it would have been really great to be able to use that as a teaching tool to say, okay, well, let's try a different process to go through this. So there's lots of room for growth.
This is another reason why I'm kind of leaning towards putting Agile at the beginning, because I think that if you had, based on exactly what Gray said, if you teach this agile information first and then you go into the quality and the assembly line, you can kind of see, okay, which one works better. Then you can kind of go back and say, if I were doing this planning and then running through versus, these iterative methods along the way, which one would be better for this particular project? And so you can kind of tie that back all along the way. Would it be better for me to plan the whole thing and then execute? Or would it be better for me to do a little bit, see where we are, make adjustments, and then move forward? And you can do that in all of the knowledge areas if they kind of get a feel for Agile early on. So just tossing that out again. Okay. So go ahead, Gray.
Here are some resources that we have used in the past for teaching these courses. There are lots and lots and lots of things out there. A couple that we have particularly used that are really good. Padlet is free. There is a free version. There's also a paid version, but Padlet is free and it's a virtual sticky note kind of thing. They also have timelines that you can build in Padlet now that would really help with the scheduling of projects. Another one is smartsheets.com. Smartsheets has a ton of really great high-level templates for project management that will really help you in providing a template for your students. It's a great.
And some of them are already in the curriculum.
Yes, some of them are already there, but there are lots more to look for as well. Other things that we've used, Edpuzzle, TED Talks, things like that. The non-web resources are also important things. The team journals is something that you will probably use, having the team or even a team notebook, right? So to keep all of their artifacts in, and that's nice to have somewhere in your room for them to store those materials. Another thing is whiteboards that you can use. You can get them cut. If you buy a shower board, actually that will work as well, and you can get these cut for you at your local hardware store. But those are good for students to do some planning and brainstorming and group techniques and things like that. So those are just some things to have on hand. Sticky notes is another one. Carol, where are your sticky notes? Right there. See, always have your sticky notes handy. They will be used in class. One thing that I ordered that really came in handy for me when I was teaching the course is I ordered different color sticky notes, just the pack of all different colors. And that was really helpful as well for students to organize their ideas and brainstorm. If you can get some rollaway whiteboards or rollaway tables, those are really helpful. Carol has the tables in her room and they work really, really well. I've utilized our media center that have the clear boards that they can stick the sticky notes on and then draw and things like that. It's really good for a hands-on approach for the students. And so that's something that would be really helpful for you to have on hand. If you can't do something like that with the sticky notes, again, utilize something like Padlet.
And digital sticky notes are phenomenal. I mean, they're great ways to share. You do save, paper resources and which is much more environmentally responsible. But I do encourage you to have your students do at least one run of paper sticky notes when they're doing design, because that is still an industry standard. It's becoming a little more digitized because of this whole issue with the pandemic, because people were not allowed to be face-to-face. But if you go into companies that do a lot of project management that are software or those types of companies, you will still find rooms that are filled with nothing but work breakdown structures and Post-it notes all over walls that just sit there and get moved around on a day-to-day basis based on whatever's going on with the project. So I think working with paper stickies is a good real world experience for the students if they have the option to do it at least once.
Absolutely. So before we move on, I think we've got about 20 minutes left. What I'd like to do is take a pause for a moment, just a pause to let all of it marinate, right? And take a moment to write a question, or we're going to talk about some teacher tips that we've learned over the years in teaching these types of courses. We're going to talk about a few things, but take a moment to generate some sort of question. You know, what I'm most concerned about is blank, or what I still don't understand is blank. And if
Or
you
what
can-
I'm most excited about is
Yes, love
let's
that.
have a positive in there, Gray.
Yes, please. So, you know, whatever you can, just to give us a little bit of feedback as to how we can best support you with our last teacher tips and things like that.
Okay, so Tammy, the content is there. And I mean, so I wouldn't say that is my biggest concern. Really, my only concern with realignment would be incorporating agile more. And I've tried to point that out as we've been talking, that but the focus on agile needs to be included. And other than that, I think our content is really solid and in preparation for the certification.
Yes, and I know that Carol has spoken with me about it. It was after we had gone through all of our processes for what curriculums we were going to work on next year. So I still hadn't got a 100% okay on if we can do some realignment with that curriculum for this coming year. We're trying to get that in, but we'll, you know, just keep seeing what's told to me by administration above.
Will do. Well, we can definitely do some offline realignment if we need to until we can make it formal.
But I see you've got it says multiple participants are typing on my end.
Yes,
So
I see that too.
Sticky notes are great. I like the old school stuff sometimes.
Yeah, those big Post-it pad stickies, you know, that you can put up on the wall are another great way to do digital stickies, because then you can, you know, move the whole group around if you have multiple classes. But they're kind of pricey, I know. So,
and another thing to think about too is like, you know, that the image that we shared at the beginning with the processes, right? That would be a good poster to have in your classroom to talk about the different, like where you are in the different phases and things like that. And then previously I had posters like on top of my whiteboard that talked about, you know, what is scope, what is time, what is quality, and kind of mapping those things out. That's another thing. If you wanted to add some of those types of things to your classroom, that would be good.
thanks, Beverly.
I've gotten them, the shower board things I got at Lowe's years ago. And it comes in like a giant sheet, like the size of a kind of a whiteboard, right? A small whiteboard, but then they can cut them for you.
I think Home Depot does them too.
Yeah, I'm sure anywhere like that would have them. Yeah. Okay, so let's we'll go through. Please continue to add things in, and as we go through, we'll talk about a couple of those things. So for classroom setup, one thing that we have both found is that it's really nice to have some sort of cooperative seating or some flexible seating to utilize for your teams. So if you're in a computer lab, it may be a little more challenging, right? So it might be something that you want to look into for when you're doing project work days. Is there a place that you can go where students can meet in teams? So in my classroom, I had the computers around the exterior of the room, and then I had a couple of conference tables in the middle of my room that teams could meet at when they needed to. So having that space that's dedicated for project management in a classroom is really helpful. I know Carol has a similar kind of setup in her room. So just thinking about how can you best utilize the space so that there is project workspace. Another thing that we've really kind of thought about is like the grading aspect of project management can be challenging because a lot of things happen in group work. So one thing that we really are feel strongly about, I think, is this process over product. So I have always incorporated a lot of reflective practice in my classroom. So students are going to do a project, and then they're going to reflect on that project. They're going to talk about their lessons learned, and that's where the majority of this of a grade can come from. Is I can evaluate their knowledge of procurement based on how they reflected. Not were they able to successfully procure materials and write this plan, but what did they learn about that process? So that's a really important kind of thing for us to think about in terms of how we evaluate student work. The other piece there is the reflect and fail forward. So if students don't do well on a particular indicator, right, let them redo that, right? Let them be able to, in a project, right, we're working through a project, something doesn't work, and a part of our project fails. What do? We have to do a change management, right? We have to fix that problem. So allowing students to do that, that's a really powerful way to not only reinforce the skill of change management, but to allow them to continue to grow in their knowledge of project management.
Yeah, and I think sometimes with those two, the process over product and the reflect and fail forward, we kind of tend to be focused on outcome in more traditional courses. Did you answer this question correctly? Did you, is the project done based on this particular rubric? And with this, sometimes I think it's more important, the original, procurement plan may be a hot mess and completely out in left field. But if in their reflection, they can go back and say, well, here's what I did wrong, and here's how I would do it differently going forward. That to me is much more important than the original plan. So I kind of look at, what did you get out of it is much more important than what you actually did. As long as the students are actually making the effort, it's not, obviously you still have to have that balance of students who, are sitting there sleeping and then try to throw something together at the last minute. That's a different type of failure than, I really did put in an effort and what I did just didn't work. Because we don't want them to get so bogged down in getting it right that they don't get the process.
So to talk a little bit about how teachers are involved in this and how this is different than a traditional class. This curriculum, again, we've talked about that. That's open for teachers to modify and to change to meet the needs of their students. Other things that we have learned is, again, as the instructor of this course, you are really a facilitator. You're going to facilitate a lot of group work, and you're going to facilitate a lot of discussion. So there's very few, yes, we provided some kind of handouts and some, presentations and slide decks, but they're not to be just put up on the screen and talked through, right? Those are jumping off points for students. So another thing is to be flexible and let students own their learning. If you have, when I first taught this course, there was not this fully developed curriculum. And so when I was teaching one of these standards, I said, okay, what do y'all want to do? Let's name a project in our school that y'all can take ownership of. What is it that you want to see changed around here? And they took that and ran with it. So taking one of those projects that you have, if you want to take one of those projects off the table and allow students to choose a project, we know that that's going to increase their engagement. We know that they're going to want to do the project that they want to do. So allowing them that opportunity is really important as well. Carol, do you want to talk about this one, or do you want me to? Doesn't matter.
You go ahead, and because I'll cover the certification stuff later. Yeah, and the questions.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. So in group work and creating this idea of what is equitable instruction, so it's really important to build psychological safety within your teams. So if you don't know what that is, take some time to look up building psychological safety. There's a lot of research about that, of how when you create your teams, it's really important for you not to give the kids the assignment and say, all right, now here are your teams, go do your work. right? It's to allow that team to go through thinking back to like Tupman stages and project management 1, allowing them to really form a team and be able to get to know each other first. There are a lot of activities that you can do that are completely not content-based, but that really ultimately will increase productivity of the group is if they know each other and they can work really well with each other in that team. So there are lots of things in our curriculum about things like think, pair, share. You're going to see a lot of that. And then ideation, divergence, and convergence. So as students are working through this curriculum, they're going to their ideas are going to diverge, meaning they're going to have a lot of different ideas, and then they're going to converge into one singular idea. So allowing the space for them to come up with a ton of ideas and then slowly shrink that down, that's another really, really important thing for them to be able to do. And then monitoring and controlling group work is really essential for you as the teacher. One thing that is helpful is if you have check-ins with your teams. So there were plenty of days where my direct instruction was 5 minutes or less. All right, folks, you have your project that you're working on today. I'll be checking in with the teams. That was my direct instruction for the students that day. Then I checked in with every single team and sat down with them and got an idea of where they were, and were able to ask them some specific questions that really helped kind of push them in the right direction if they needed it. But again, it's not just, here's your group work, I'm going to sit at my desk and grade papers, which I'll be guilty of it, you know, like it was tempting to do, but really sitting down and checking in with each group, that will also increase your group engagement for those students who might be trying to check out with certain assignments.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think we've talked about most of these pieces here. Again, allowing students to do some self-reflection and self-evaluation. One of my favorite things, and I stole this from Carol, one of my favorite activities to do is at the end of a project, if there are 4 people in a group, say, okay, you have 350 points or 360 points to distribute among your team. What grades are you going to give to each person in your group and why?
The why is the important part.
Yes, and they have to explain why they feel that this person deserves this score. And interestingly enough, most, despite the fact they're doing this all very individually, most of them give about the same amount of points to each member of their team. And some students are even harder on themselves than their team members are going to be. But that's a really important reflective tool that students can do that will help you also as a teacher to kind of get a gauge on how much students have contributed to different tasks.
Yeah, we did that.
And we've definitely talked about this. So Carol, do you want to go in and talk about the questions in the chat?
So yeah, so we covered a couple of those. So as far as Lou, I think the journal secretary for each team is a fabulous idea. I love that. Usually for most of the units that we have set right now, we just have questions, reflective questions for each one of the projects. So we don't really use Cornell Notes or time map or anything specific. We just have a list of questions, so you can put it in whatever format you want. And you don't even have to use the questions that we have. You can create your own. We just set a list of reflective questions for each particular project that kind of ties you back to that particular concept. And I have them I use Canvas, so everything I do is through Canvas. Every once in a while, I'll do some type of Padlet. You know, just if we're just doing some kind of brainstorming thing, like maybe not at the end of the project, but maybe at the end of a day to do let's do a quick daily stand up and tell us where we are and where we need to go. I might do it in a Padlet or some type of Post-it format. But generally speaking, mine are just turned in through Canvas. All right, Lisa, so I left your question for last because I think that one's probably the maybe a little bit of the elephant in the room. So my intention going forward is to incorporate some of the prep stuff along the way. I would kind of like to have them do some practice tests throughout the semester. As I taught it in the spring, I didn't have access to it until the very end of the semester. So I didn't get to incorporate it quite as early as I would have liked to have done. But I do think, and if any of you have taught a certification class before, Adobe or Microsoft or accounting, anything that is certification based, the timing involved in that and being under a very tight timeline that's not, hey, we can just give you more time to finish this exam, is always a challenge for kids, being able to pace. So I think, having them practice that is always good. I really like Measure Up, which is the practice website. Measure Up is what the practice tests are through. And you, as the instructor, once you set it up, it will actually send you a notification every time one of your students completes a practice, and it'll tell you how they did, as well as sending it to them. So you can kind of use that if you have everybody in the class do one that you've set up. You can kind of see what they got and what they didn't. So it kind of allows you to reflect and use that data to, guide what you work on next. So hopefully that answers your question. I'll use the prep and the practice tests throughout. And then, of course, we'll do some more full real world certification practices right before we do the test. That's my intention. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Yes, Gray, absolutely.
So I just threw that in the chat. There's a stoplight method that you can use for students to kind of gauge their progress as an alternative to a reflection. That's something to kind of drop in and mix in with those different things.
Yes. So Lisa, it's 47 questions and 50 minutes. And passing is 700 out of 1,000. So I have no idea, just like with the Microsoft certifications and some of the others, we really have no idea how they come up with the scores. There's some kind of algorithm out there, I'm sure, that they use, but nobody except for the designer seem to be privy to that information.
All right, folks, we are coming in on the end of our session.
You're welcome.
If you have any last minute questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We would love to answer those. Additionally, here are our email addresses. You are welcome to email us. I'm happy to jump on a Google Meet with you and help you think about something, or if you are trying to think of some ideas and just aren't really sure where to go, you want a sounding board, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Carol would also be happy to help.
Absolutely.
So this PowerPoint will be posted through the conference site. They'll be able to get that information posted. So it will be available, and then you'll be able to get our email addresses from that. So please, again, thank you for joining us. If you have any last minute questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Carol, Gray. You guys did wonderful as always. Very informational. Thank you guys for all the chat in the chat box also. That helps everyone when we share. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.